And let me hit the record button. Yeah, excellent. Okay, thanks, Kia.
Okay, so hi, my name's Kia. I'm one of the support workers for Hampshire SENDIASS. The focus today is going to be on the return to school. I know that might feel a bit, you know, we've already done that for now, but I think it's still helpful to go through what should have been happening. So which children should be in school? From the 8th of March, all children should be in school, and attendance will be mandatory from this point. Some schools will have phased returns, you know, to set up their testing and things like that. And children and young people are expected to return to school in line with their individual schools plan. Children and young people who came under the vulnerable key worker terms during the lockdown, they should have been able to continue attending school during those phased returns. That their sort of days of attendance shouldn't change at all during that period, unless of course they receive a positive COVID test, which just throws everything else up in the air. It also includes clinically extremely vulnerable children. They should also be in school unless they've been individually told otherwise. Children are gradually being removed from the shielding list, and that's being done by review with a clinician. So it's a health decision, not an education decision, to remove the child from that list. So it shouldn't be the case that the school's saying, for example, oh, we're worried that, you know, your child won't be safe because of their medical needs, so we'd rather you keep them at home until some point. That's not an educational decision, that's a health decision. And equally, you know, your child's school may check that your child has actually been advised not to attend school by asking to see the letter. And, you know, so feel free to share it with them if that is the case. Also, children who live with someone who's clinically extremely vulnerable or shielding, they should be attending school. So if we come on to what will happen if families don't want to send their children in, because sort of thinking about those families with parents or carers who are clinically extremely vulnerable, and, you know, obviously that presents a bit of a problem because attendance will be or is absolutely mandatory from the 8th of March, and parents will have a legal duty to ensure their child attends. You know, there is some leeway with the setting up the testing program and those phased returns. The absence wouldn't be penalised at that point, but generally speaking, the usual attendance rules apply, and parents have to make sure their child attends. And that also applies, you know, even if you yourself are clinically extremely vulnerable or shielding, your child still has to attend. And of course that could present all kinds of, you know, problematic scenarios if your child's unable to go to school by themselves or without you. I think in these, it's one of those grey area situations where there's nothing clear in guidance or in law about what can be done to help with that. I think it's a case of you know, schools and families working creatively together to ensure that the child can attend. So it could be that a family friend helps out, or it could be that, you know, teaching staff are able to help with that. And again, I think it is sort of on an individual basis, thinking creatively. So then thinking about what should be in place in schools now that they've reopened and all the kids are back, you know, most of the kids are back. Children on SEN support and children with EHC plans should be receiving all their support as usual. The only reason that might not be happening would be related to staffing or staff training due to COVID, but in the sense that, you know, people are unwell or they're self-isolating. It can't be just a sort of blanket, well, COVID, so that's not acceptable. It has to be for that particular reason. You know, there aren't enough staff due to illness or and things like that. It can't just be a blanket because of the bubbles or things like that. It's too difficult. So you'd expect that if for whatever reason your child wasn't receiving the support they're supposed to receive due to that reason, schools should be trying to get back to as close as possible to your child's usual provision as soon as possible. So in the first lockdown, like a year ago, you know, there was that relaxation of the must duty about, you know, whether about local authorities absolutely securing the provision in a plan. That hasn't happened this time round. You know, there is no relaxation of the duty. It absolutely has to be in place. And alongside that, the usual timescales and legislation for EHC needs assessments and annual reviews, all of that applies. There's no sort of reason that can be given why that shouldn't be happening. Part-time timetables, using those for return to school. I think it's important to look at why a part-time timetable is being suggested for a child or young person, because, you know, I think they can be useful in individual situations to help some children and young people return to school. You know, for example, looking at mental health concerns like anxiety, or autistic children and young people who are struggling with the change of transitioning back into a school environment. If they're being used as a way of managing behaviours, that's quite problematic. They should only be used in cooperation with the family. So if the school's sort of saying to the family, this is what's happening, your child's only going to be doing 3 hours a day, for example, that shouldn't, and you don't agree, that should be formalised as, well, it would be an unlawful exclusion. They can only exclude children for disciplinary reasons, and if that's the case, they should then be formalising that as a fixed term exclusion. And again, you know, it can't be a sort of blanket, well, they're very anxious, so we're just going to do 3 hours a day and that's better for them. There should always be a clear plan for the child to return to school full time. And it may be that because of their needs, they need more support. And that's the sort of thing that the school should be putting in place for the child. But I think it's just really important to know that, you know, it has to be done with the family's agreement. It can't be just sort of imposed on the child or young person. And I mean, I've talked about how, you know, some pupils really struggling with lockdown. I think on the flip side, there are some children who have really flourished in lockdown, you know, removed from all the external factors that you have in a school, just to being in their safe home environment, and they've perhaps done even better than they otherwise would. So I think, you know, it's important to think about why home education would be an option. Is it due to safety? You know, worrying about the virus and bringing it home, and, you know, what could be done to alleviate some of those concerns? I would imagine that the more common reason would be, as I've said, that the child's more able to learn in a home environment compared to at school. And again, thinking about what could be done to sort of replicate some of those environments in a school situation. I would say that, you know, if your child does have an EHC plan, really, really carefully consider whether you want to deregister them and electively home educate, because in that case, the local authority will no longer have a duty to secure the provision in the plan. It really will be just up to the parent or carer to provide everything. And that's why I also wanted to mention education other than at school, EOTAS. I think sometimes it can look like you talk about, oh, well, they're not in school, they're home educated, but sometimes it's the case that a child can't be educated in a school. It's just completely not the right environment for them. And this is another way of learning. So it could be that they have a package of different therapies, they receive some tutoring. So it's not the parent delivering the education, it's still being done by external agencies. It's just being delivered outside of school, so to speak. So in that case, if you had an EHC plan, the local authority would still have to secure the provision in that plan.
The question in there, Kia, which is
Yes.
connected to education other than at school, sort of not necessarily at this time, but in general. How easy is it to get, and how do we say it, EOTAS?
Yeah, EOTAS.
EOTAS placement. Currently in a specialist independent school, which is a great school, but things are not working and my child is still not attending. So I don't know a great deal about EOTAS settings.
Yeah, so they're not settings really.
Oh, okay, right.
They could be, it depends, it's really individualized support for the child. So they usually would come about if the child just absolutely can't be educated at school, they can't attend school, and it's not just that setting that's the issue, there is no setting that can meet their need. And in that case, you would be looking at what the child requires and thinking about different ways to deliver it. So I think for the local authority to consider it, they would have to sort of exhaust all schooling options, but then they would look at this, it is possible.
So the answer is not necessarily easy to achieve, but achievable. Otherwise, it wouldn't be out there.
Yeah.
But very much the option when everything else has been explored.
Yeah, they would certainly be looking at schools before EOTAS. They would have to try and find a school that would meet need. But it's not always possible.
Yeah. Super. Thank you.
I think that brings me to the end, really.
Oh,
I've put I've put our helpline number there and the email address, which hopefully you all have. But I'm very happy to answer any questions that have come up, anything I've missed in this. Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop sharing.
Yeah.
I've just got a comment, I think, following on really from that comment about education other than at school, saying nothing is easy with the LA. We've tried both mainstream and the specialist independent school. No, I would tend to agree from my own experience of that of the parents that I sort of see in my get-togethers, that unfortunately often things are a battle. However, what I would also say is I think with the right support, parents are often in a very good position to get the support that they believe is right for their child in the end. It's not a straightforward thing to do, but with SENDIASS support and whatnot, I think ultimately you can get there, but it's not as straightforward as it should be. Something that I thought about, Kia, that I know about and has been talked about in other sessions I've been in recently, is therapies in school. So as we're going back to this new world, and some children and young people within their EHCPs have access to OT or to speech and language therapy, should those things be restarting?
They absolutely should be in place, like completely. I can understand that. I imagine that lots of parents are being told, oh, they can't go in and things like that, but it should all be being delivered. And it could be that perhaps a particular therapist for their own health reasons can't be going into school, but the local authority still should be providing what's in the plan, for example, and they should be thinking creatively about ensuring it's delivered. It could be online, it could be, you know, another therapist being brought in to cover it. But it's clear that it should be being done, and I really recognise how hard it is for parents to sort of stand up to this, not stand up to the school, but to sort of voice their concerns about things not being done.
I think it's really tricky at the moment, isn't it? Because I think parents aren't even sort of meeting with